My name is Brad Shepard, and I'm a marketing executive here at Exclaimer, and I'm going to take you through this presentation, The Ultimate Guide to Email Signatures. I'm going to start off by setting a little context. First of all, I'm talking about corporate email, not direct marketing email. I'm talking about corporate email that you might send to another employee in another organization. You might send to a customer of your organization, that you might send to one of the suppliers of your organization. This is not email that has been written by marketing and has maybe thousands of copies, identical copies of that email sent out to thousands of people. Instead, we're talking about an email typed up by an individual and maybe sent to a set or just one specific individual. Now, we are going to use this added content underneath that corporate email, that email signature, for greater business benefit, to get our messages on that corporate email and get into that communications channel and start generating business benefit through that. Now, why would we want to? Why are we interested in getting our messages on corporate email? There are a number of attributes that are unique to corporate email as a marketing channel that make it especially interesting. First of all, it's business relevant. So because it's not direct marketing email that someone in some abstract scenario has written about a particular product or some marketing message, instead it was written with me in mind. So it's relevant to my role. At the very least, it's going to be in some way connected to what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I have a reason to open it and a reason to read it. It's also high volume. So market research estimates that on average, about 40 emails a day are sent by each email user in your office. So if you have, say, 50 users in your office, that's going to be 2,000 emails sent every single day, 10,000 every week. It can be an enormous channel if you tap into it. You can get a huge number of impressions and continuously over time. So not just in one large burst, but again and again, day after day, week after week. So we can use it to continuously remind people of things or to continuously maintain awareness of a particular campaign or particular message. Now, it's also valued. So the content in there is probably something that in some way has some sort of weight related to what I do. So it might be something that I requested in a roundabout way. It might be something that can help me in my role. Even if it's something as simple as, say, a price list from a potential supplier, that can actually be much, much more valuable than, say, some marketing speak in direct marketing email. Now, it's also personal. As I was saying with that first point, it was written with me in mind. So it is actually personal to me. It may be related to, say, my actual individual person, beyond just my job role. And what's especially interesting in this point is, of course, that we can use email signatures to tailor messages specifically to what people are interested in. But we'll get into that in a little while. And that also touches on the fact that it can be targeted in many ways, targeted over time, maybe having a different version of the signature depending on when the email is sent. Maybe have a timed campaign to promote a sale that's only going to last for a particular month. Similarly, it could be targeted at different groups within your customer base. Maybe new customers could see one version of the signature and older customers could see a different version because they're interacting with different departments. One might be interacting with, say, sales, another might be interacting with customer service. Now, let's dive into that. How can we target the email signature? How can we change it for different audiences? Well, for example, we could change it by sender. So like I was mentioning there, I could give one version to senders in the sales department and a different version to people sending an email from the customer service department, knowing that, for example, new customers and potential new customers are speaking to sales, whereas current customers and customers with a certain issue might be speaking to customer service, and so on through my other departments. Maybe I know that procurement speak almost exclusively to our suppliers. And similarly, if I have any automated emails that are sent out, say from an auto invoicing or a CRM system, in their case, I want those emails to look just as professional and high quality as an email that might be sent out by one of the human beings in my organization. Just because it's automated doesn't mean it shouldn't meet the same high standards I have for my corporate communications. And very similarly, it should be of the same high quality even if it's sent from a mobile device. So if it's sent from a BlackBerry, iPad, iPhone, whatever tablet or smartphone you care to mention, I want the same high quality signature on any email I send, no matter what device I'm using, no matter where I am. And the last point is that I keep mentioning this as a single communications channel, but actually it's twofold. So we have the one channel for interacting with people outside our organization, potential customers, potential suppliers, people who might be interested in, say, a sale that we're holding, in, say, some sort of awareness that we're pushing. But there's also the internal communications channel, because of course all of our colleagues see emails from us too. So we can use that to give them messages that are internally relevant for internal comms or for HR communications. And we'll get into that in some of the later sections in a little while. We break the email signature down into 6 main components, the 6 C's of email signatures. First of all, you have your brand elements, the logo, the colors, the formatting, any font that might be characteristically of your brand, all of these for conforming to brand guidelines. And then contact details to make it easier for contacts to reach you. And then, of course, any certifications to denote authority, expertise. Social media content for connecting mail to social media. And of course, any marketing banners for communicating marketing messages using that email signature. And then, of course, the legal disclaimer for compliance. Now, I'm going to look at each of these components in depth in turn, but I'm going to start off with conforming to brand guidelines, because decisions made here about how the email signature will look will have ramifications later on as to how we decide on how to display some of these other components. So in this first example, we have Vodafone, who are a cell phone service provider, very much like Verizon or AT&T in the US, if you're not familiar with Vodafone already. Now, this was the signature they had before we at Exclaimer helped them out. The problem here is that we have a solid block of color. This, in a way, looks sort of out of place on an email. Remember, we have this plain white background and this reasonably dark plain font. So having this solid business card-like block of color looks a little bit garish. It doesn't look professional and smooth. Now, it does look very Vodafone. It has their characteristic red branding. It has their quotation mark logo. Now let's take a look at how we changed this. So this is something much more minimal, but it still has that same red coloring. It still has that same quotation mark logo. It still says Vodafone. It's still recognizably conforming to their brand guidelines. And yet we've made it match much more with the context of an email. Remember how plain an email can be. It's this plain white background with some plain dark font on it. So we don't want something that's just going to stand out and stick out and look a little bit too much. Instead, we want to make sure that it fits with the entire message. Now, what if your brand requires something more over the top, more vivid, more visually striking? In that case, we want to put content above and below and beside our message. That way we're getting our branding throughout the entire email. So instead of it being one solid block of color, one business card tacked onto the email, instead it's something that makes the entire thing look like corporate paper or corporate letterhead. So, quick recap. Reinterpret your brand for signatures. Vodafone's initial signature, if you recall, was red. It included their quotation mark logo, but what it lacked was context. It didn't look right in the context of this plain white background, plain dark font email. Let brand elements inform the design. So if you have a very tall email signature, then you're going to push content down as you have multiple replies and forwards. And then that means that it's going to compromise readability. So don't over-brand it. And if you do need to, if you do want branding throughout that message, ensure that it's above, below, beside, ensuring that the entire message then takes on the look of a corporate letterhead rather than one single block of color. The last point is thinking about enforcement. How are you going to make sure that your users actually use that email signature? If you create a template, how will you know that it's actually being sent out on emails and users haven't ignored it or changed it or just removed it entirely? Now, the element that people tend to think of first when they think of email signatures, the contact details. So there are a number of things in here that I might want to include. Standard stuff like my name and my job title. Everyone thinks of using those. Sometimes a handwritten signature image can be useful, seen up there in the top right of that email signature. can give that hands-on touch, that personal feel that some organizations are looking for. Now, it's also worthwhile putting on your email address. Now, I appreciate that you will need to have received an email from someone to see that email signature at all. However, in some cases, an email might be forwarded, and the from address can be converted just to a display name. So instead of it being bradley.shepard@greenorg.net, it would just be Brad Shepard. So it's useless if you want to try and get in touch with that person. Hence why, if you have your email address in that signature, that can be instrumental in someone getting in touch with you quickly and easily. Also worth having on there is maybe the hours that you work. So if, for example, you arrive early and leave early during the day, or if maybe you work a different working week to other people. For example, if you're returning from maternity leave and you work Wednesday to Friday, that's very valuable information on there because, of course, we can give our contacts information that is actually useful to them. In some ways, it's worth thinking of this almost on a transactional basis. Think of the person receiving this like a customer. What are they going to be interested in? What is going to offer them value? Don't put everything in there. Just put in the things that they will want from you. Now, this next example is a printing company. In their case, they've done something very interesting with their signature. So they have some standard stuff on here: name, telephone number, website, physical address, because shipping times might need to be factored in. So it's important that clients know exactly where they are in the world. But what I really want to look at here is that you send it link, second from the right, next to that Facebook and Twitter icon. So what they can do here is, say a client has an enormous file that they need printed. These guys are printing off, say, posters that are supposed to go on advertisement billboards, or huge, high-definition, glossy brochures for luxury goods clients. So in those cases, those files are going to be huge. They're too big to email. So what they need to do is upload them to this printing company's You Send It account. So what they've done here is, with this email signature, with these contact details, someone can click that, go straight to their You Send It profile, and upload the file they want to get to this printing company, instead of having to worry about finding out exactly what they need to do, what the process is for uploading that file. Instead, they can click on that signature and immediately start working. But as useful as that is, we can't overdo it. So if we have a ton of contact details that we want to include, it might be useful to use a V card or a QR code so that a user can very quickly and easily download those contact details. Yes, if you have multiple offices with multiple physical addresses, all of those contact details might be useful in some scenarios for some of your contacts. But instead of packing it all into a signature visually and making it too big, making it larger than the actual message itself, instead what we can do is we can put it in a QR code or in a V card that someone can download and immediately import into their contacts. So that way they can still have access to all that information, but it's not going to clutter up the visuals of your signature. It's not just about external contacts, it's also about internal contacts too. Have an internal version of the signature that is only meant for your colleagues within your organization. So for example, the first thing you can see on here is that staff photo. It's a great way to help build a rapport between staff. Maybe they work together on a project for a long period of time, but they don't actually know what the other one looks like. That might keep them from, say, bad-mouthing that project when that person is actually standing right in front of them in the cafeteria. Or it might just help to sort out confusion when they meet with someone in person for the first time. Say they are meeting with two guys that work in another department. One's called Neil, one's called Chris. How are they going to know which one's which? That photo can solve issues like that. Now, similarly, an internal extension included on that signature. So very much like, say, having your external phone number on an email to contacts outside the organization. Here, we can save ourselves, say, a long 10, 15 email long conversation with just a quick phone call, hitting a couple digits on that phone and getting in touch. Same thing with their location within the building. Say you have multiple floors in a building. Say you actually have multiple regional offices. This way, someone will know where you are. Say you have a meeting, they'll know where to go. Or say you have multiple offices around the world. They'll know, for example, what time zone you're working in. So, to recap, cultural cues will tell you what's going to be valuable in an organizational context. Try and think about what is actually going to provide utility for your contacts. Now, also, try and think about how much they need it and how much space it's going to take up. I'm sure that in some instances your physical address may be useful, but does everyone need it? Try and think about using, say, V-cards or QR codes to limit the amount of space that it needs. Also think about an internal version of your signature. How can it be useful for internal contacts? Now, the last point I want to make is, how are you going to make sure that all those contact details are correct? Even if we have, say, 3 details in each person's signature, say a name, job title, and an email address. In those cases, that's 3 contact details per person, and even a small 40-person organization, that's 120 details that we have to make sure are correct, which means that it's a pretty heavy labor overhead every time we want to change that signature. Think about how you're going to manage that going forward. Awards, certifications, industry accolades, anything that you might want to include on the signature that denotes that quality, that expertise that you want to communicate to your contacts. So in this example, we've got someone who's a Microsoft certified system administrator. That's just one. It could be, say, a Google AdWords qualified individual, like in the case of this marketing agency. So they have their account managers emailing their clients, giving them advice on marketing, providing that marketing agency service. Now, some of the topics that they will talk about are Google AdWords. And so in that case, there may be a slightly touchy subject there, as that can be an enormous expense for some organizations. They're paying to appear beside Google search results for terms like plasma screen TVs or next generation video games console. And so in those cases, you're going to pay top dollar to appear beside those search results. So it's a touchy subject. Potentially, you might be asking them to spend a little bit more money than they're comfortable with, or to spend a little bit less and risk missing out on some potentially high-profile customers. So what they need is this certification to communicate this expertise, this authority, to show that they're an absolute expert in this field, that Google has qualified them to do this, to give them this advice, that the advice they're providing is from years of training, from passing some pretty tough exams and going on some pretty long and grueling courses. It's not just something they cooked up on their own. Now, it's not just at the individual level, it's also at the organizational level. So say you're one of the top workplaces to work for in 2012. Say you are one of the 100 fastest growing small businesses in a particular region. Any number of these things can be really useful, even if they're not directly related to what you do or what you're emailing at that particular time. It says that you're an established partner within your industry. It communicates this respectability, this quality that you want to get across. Maybe it's not specific to the subject of your email, but it is related to the type of quality and the type of excellence that you want to provide and communicate. Now, say there are also legal requirements in your field. So say in your industry you are legally required to be listed with, in this example, say the property ombudsman, or for example that you're a member of the Guild of Real and Local Estate Agents. So what's interesting here is not necessarily that it's legally required to have these certifications on here, but that people can know just by looking at your email that you meet all of the requirements, that you are indeed above board, that you're legitimate, that you are qualified. Not necessarily to communicate expertise or experience or how established you are, but just so that they can have that reassurance in their mind when they speak to you as soon as they look at your email. Now, don't overdo it. This is maybe one of the most complicated components in terms of allowing yourself to put too much content in here. Now, I appreciate that many things may be relevant. Try to have instead different versions of your signature that you use in different contexts. Say you're an import-export business and you work with different regions of the world. When you're emailing North America, show your certificates for importing contents into the US and Canada, etc. If you're dealing with, say, the European region, show your certificates for dealing with the EU, with the UK, with France, etc. So have different versions in different contexts. So, just to recap, you've paid for them, so use them. Ensure that you get that value out of them. Also think about what's important and relevant. Don't just tack everything on there. Think about what's going to make a difference. Also think about it at the personal and at the corporate level. So not just what individuals have achieved and been sort of awarded by particular industry bodies, also think about what your entire organization has done. Now, let's think about consistency across all your users. Make sure that people don't include something silly like, their swimming badge from Boy Scouts, or maybe something that they are proud of. Think about how you're going to ensure that all of these certifications are correct, that they have the most recent version as sort of provided and displayed by that qualifying body like Microsoft or Google, and ensuring they link to an appropriate page that describes what it actually means. So, connecting mail to social media using social media content. So this is actually a major driver for email signatures. So there are two types of this component. On the one hand, on the right, as you can see, we have a YouTube icon, we have a Twitter, LinkedIn. These are the interactive buttons. So maybe I could click that Twitter icon and immediately start following this person on Twitter, or retweet something that they've tweeted. And that's where it links down to that social media feed just underneath the signature. So there we could show off maybe, for example, a recent tweet, or maybe a snippet from our most recent blog post. Here we're showing off some of the content that we have on social media. We're showcasing some of the stuff that we do. And we can have effectively a two-pronged attack. We have the social media feed to show people what we're doing, and then that interactive button to encourage people to engage with us. Now, there are many different contexts and different networks that you can use. It doesn't have to just be the typical teenage social networks like Facebook and Twitter. You could use all kinds of things. Even industry forums that are relevant might be useful, or your corporate blog, as in the case of Morgan Stanley. So what they wanted was this continually updating feed in their email signature showing off what was being added to their corporate blog, so that when they emailed their contacts, they could see what they were promoting, what they were putting up on there. Partly to provide information, but also partly to entice people to interact with them even more on social media. So, think about how you can try and use the information, the social media activity that you have to entice people to come and join you, and what's going to be effective going forward. So, quick recap. Links to signpost. Show them exactly how they can interact with you. Also, buttons to allow them to connect with you on that social media. Dynamic content to encourage them to want to join with you on social media. Think about it also at the individual and at the organizational level. Great example might be having a interactive link to your Twitter account for the entire organization, but maybe a LinkedIn link to that specific user's LinkedIn account. And also leverage the context. Think about when they're going to be looking at that particular email. Think about how you can encourage them to interact with you on social media in a way that's relevant to the way they're already interacting with you. Now, going forward, we also need to consider how we're going to ensure that this is updated frequently. If we have a social feed in there, how's it going to be updated in real time as I'm maybe putting these tweets live on Twitter? And how am I going to track interactions? So if people are clicking on these links, if they are coming through and following me and subscribing to my channel on YouTube, etc., how can I track those clicks and capture data on them? A little bit about that shortly, but now I want to move on to communicating marketing messages using a campaign banner. So we have Vodafone here again, if you remember from earlier in the presentation, and what they're doing here is promoting the latest phones offered on their cell phone service. So what they want to do is often and frequently update this banner so they're always showing off the latest set of phones. After maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, this display as you see it now will perish. It won't be accurate any longer. So they need to have this constant churn. It needs to be constantly updated, and they want to schedule those updates in advance. So partly too, we also want to think about how we can use this as a method for getting information to everyone that we email, every single one of our contacts. Great example here is an event. So as many people as possible coming to this is a good thing. No matter who they are, no matter how we know them, as long as they're there, they're providing some value for us. We're getting more of a cost-effective event the more people go. So by putting this in the signature, we guarantee that everyone that we email will see this. Now, it's also great for any topic that might be difficult to broach for the person actually emailing. So for example, this is an automotive dealership, and their salespeople will email out some of these potential clients, some of these potential customers, and what we have here is a banner that promotes certain product extras. So you might use this at a point when you're pretty sure that you're going to close the deal. You're pretty sure they're going to buy the car and they trust you, you've built a relationship. But what you don't want to do is rock the boat and make them worry that you're just trying to fleece them for as much money as possible. So what they can do is they can put a banner in their signature. They can select from a few different versions, all of them conforming to brand guidelines, using the same high quality logo, using the same contact details. The only thing they have control over is the banner. But what they can do is use a different version when they want to promote a different product extra, ensuring that they can show one person that's open to maybe having this servicing contract this banner, and a different person that's maybe interested in satellite navigation a different version. So that way they could tailor the message to bring up a certain product extra to make it part of the conversation without seeming to give a hard sell. Now, it's also great for capturing data. So what we could do is you could add a click tag to the link in this banner so that when someone clicks on it, we can see who they are, what their email address is, and what they do on the page. We could even track that in Google Analytics, so we could see how long they spend on the page, what page they go on to visit, etc. Everything you would expect to be able to see via, say, any other online marketing channel, you should be able to see about your signatures. But it doesn't even need to be that complicated. There's a restaurant using signatures to promote their online booking tool. So what they do is when someone emails in or calls in and they send out this confirmation email, they have this little reminder to use their online booking tool. That way, the next time someone wants to book a table, they can just do it online without any labor cost and much more quickly and efficiently for themselves. So this way, they can change customer behavior. They're bringing the information to where their contacts are, not expecting them to come to them to find out. Now, I mentioned that this channel is twofold. It's also relevant for internal communications. So here we have something that's promoting a quality initiative, trying to get people ready to think about improving quality and resourcefulness and organization around the company. But we could do a number of things here. We could maybe have a reminder for people to turn off their computers when they leave the office at night, or to close windows during summertime. Anything that our colleagues or internal comms might be relevant for can be used in this banner. So that was a pretty large section, so I'm not going to recap everything. I'm just going to try and focus on the main points. Promotional banners work extremely well on signatures. The clicks are free and we can track them just like any other online marketing channel. We can also allow individuals to decide which version of the message they want to show for various reasons. And we can change behaviors because we know who is seeing it and we know that it will be seen again and again. Now, lastly, don't forget that it's also useful in an internal context. And the last point I want to make is you will need to change them going forward. You will need to update them automatically or easily in advance without having to have this huge labor cost of diving into them and trying to fix something. So, the legal disclaimer for legal compliance. Now, this is just one quick slide because there's not as much to look at here, but it's worth pointing out two key things. First of all, in many regions, in many industries, it is legally required to include a disclaimer on your email. So the first thing that we want to have is a guarantee that it will be included on every applicable email, so that we're not worrying about whether it actually goes on. We're not worrying about potentially getting fined or penalized or shut down merely because we forgot to include a disclaimer. Now, the other point is that we want to add it intelligently. So rather than adding it under every single email we send, it could be added once in a conversation of replies and forwards, etc., and not again. Rather than underneath every single message we send, it would be once down at the bottom, out of the way, and not cluttering up our email. So that was just one slide, so the recap is pretty short. Just think about being compliant, but no more. Think about adding it intelligently so it's not under every single message. Every line is a line you can't use for something better. And of course, the thing we have to think about maybe more here than anywhere else is enforcement. If people can delete it or change it, then it's not doing its job. And that's why, as we see it, software is the best way to manage email signatures. And we have 7 reasons, the 7 C's of email signature software, as to why it's the best way to manage them. The first one, control. You decide how it looks, and you decide which versions are applied to which departments. Just like we needed in a number of those examples in that certification section, that marketing agency, that Microsoft Certified Systems Administrator. We don't want those things going on departments' email signatures who aren't actually qualified. And we get the ability to change it at will, quickly, and schedule changes in advance so that something can be updated automatically going forward. Just like, for example, Vodafone needed with their banner promoting their most recent phones every few weeks, and Morgan Stanley having their social media feed automatically updating, showing content from their corporate blog. And then, of course, we have consistency. So the knowledge that everyone's email signature will meet my brand guidelines, that they will all be of that high quality I expect. Even if there are different versions for different departments, they will all use the correct logo. They will all meet the standard I've prescribed. And it adds convenience. So I know that I can change it easily and quickly. And on top of that, there's no learning curve. It's not like there's a ton of training that I have to do. It's not like I have to try and get my head around complex HTML. I can just dive right in and do it. And of course, I can also capture data. So I can add a click tag so that I can get just as much insight as to how successful my email signatures are as I would for any other online marketing channel, just like that CRM software company we're doing. And I can reduce cost, both the labor cost of updating it manually and the opportunity cost of scaring away potential customers by looking unprofessional or amateur. Now, lastly, I get certainty. I get the absolute guarantee that I will get all of those things. But it's not that simple. There are multiple types of email signature software to choose from. There's distributed software and centralized software. So distributed software can be installed on any machine in your network, a PC or a server. And from there, it distributes signatures to the program you're using to send email, to Outlook. So as you're writing your email, you can see the signature underneath. Now, centralized software works differently. You type your message, and then as it's processed by the email server, then it's added. So that means that you can't see it as you're typing, but it can be added to email from any device. Now, these are two different ways of achieving really the same thing, signature control and signature management. Now, I want to look at exactly what makes them different and the effect that has on what they can do. Distributed software lets you choose the signature as you send, not change it, but decide which version you want to use. That might be perfect if you wanted to offer people a little leeway, like that automotive dealership. Now, it can also control formatting, so deciding what font types, what font size, what color to use. So you could lock everything down and say it has to be something professional, something on brand. It can't do recipient-based rules, so it couldn't change something automatically based on who an email is going to. It can give you a reply or a forward version, but it's not able to automatically change it based on who's addressed. So, over to centralized software. That can add email signatures to email sent from any device, tablet, smartphone, desktop computer, anything. No matter where you are in the world, you can get the same high-quality signature on every email you send. Now, it can also change the signature based on who an email is going to, which is a great way to have an internal signature set up, looking at who an email is going to, seeing that it's an internal colleague, and changing it to show this internal version. So, it's also adding content in real time. Perfect if we want to have a social media feed being updated as soon as something goes live on my social media network. Now, it can also remove content automatically based on, say, if there's something like it already present in the message. A great example there is going to be that disclaimer that we don't want appearing underneath every single email we send. Now, distributed software could be installed on a PC in the marketing department, meaning they could control it all on their own, without help from IT, really. Whereas if you wanted, you could let IT control it in part and let marketing do some of the other aspects like designing it and making it look good. Now, centralized software requires IT to control it at least in part. Because it's on the Exchange server, they're not going to let marketing anywhere near it. So, marketing can still control the visuals, the templates, the designs, still make it look perfect, but IT would still need to do the more IT side of things, deciding on rules, permissions, etc. Now, I want to demonstrate both for you guys because Exclaimer provides both types of software. Exclaimer Signature Manager is our distributed option working with Outlook, and Exclaimer Mail Disclaimers is our centralized option working with Exchange. Don't be distracted by the names. They both do signatures and disclaimers. The difference is the way that they do them. So we'll start off with Signature Manager in this demonstration because Mail Disclaimers makes a little bit more sense once you know email signature software a little better. Let's get started. Now, this is an example email signature here in Outlook, provided by Signature Manager. That's the software working directly with Outlook. Now, in this example, we're imagining that this company is an IT reseller. So they're reselling software and hardware, and the imaginary Brad Shepard that works in this company is a client manager in the sales department. So he's advising customers on which software, which hardware is going to be best for them. And as we can see here in his signature, he's a Microsoft certified professional. And we actually can get a lot of information from his contact details here. We know he's a client manager, we know he's in sales, but we still know that he's certified to provide that service. We also can see that we can click this and follow Data Plus on Twitter. And down here underneath, we've got a tweet from their Twitter feed just to entice people to start following them and interacting with them on social media. And then underneath, there's a little campaign banner promoting their webinar just to guide them through various products. So I've also got a much simpler reply version, which I can use if I want. Here it is, nice, no frills, and that'll be automatically used when I open a reply message. And then, also interestingly, I have a secondary version of that signature. So here, it's showing I'm Microsoft certified because that's going to come up a lot. But in some cases, people want to use Oracle software. So in those instances, I'm going to use the Oracle version of this signature to show that I'm Oracle certified. I don't want both on there because it would break my design a little bit, but instead I'm going to have different versions to use the best one in each context. So let's take a look at how I put this together in Signature Manager. So this was a client-facing signature, but not every department is going to be the same. In here, I have multiple policies for the different types of roles in my organization. So I've got this sales signature. That's the one I had, and you saw it there. But the marketing signature is different. So they aren't technically certified to recommend different products, but instead they've got a different certification on their signature. The company was Innovation Awards shortlisted. That's communicating the type of quality and how established and respectable the organization is. So they need that in their version. So I've got separate policies for the separate departments. Now, this is their default signature for new messages in Outlook, just like it is, say, for the sales team. However, I also want to have a reply version of my signature. And so here in the Options tab, this is set to be the default signature for replies and forwards in Outlook. So that means that I can have maybe this fuller, more complete version on the initial message, but on replies, I can have this nice, simple, understated copy. So I also have this secondary signature, which I showed you a moment ago. Interestingly, this isn't the default for new messages or replies. It's just an option. It can be included if needed, but we're not going to add it as a default because remember, it was just a secondary signature. Now, how have I differentiated between the different departments here? If I go into this Conditions tab, this is only adding the signature if the user is a member of an Active Directory group, specifically sales. Same thing here with this marketing signature. So here in Conditions, this is only being added if the user is a member of the Active Directory group, marketing. Now, what if you're not in one of those? Well, in that case, we don't really need that much extra content, so we just have this plain, basic signature here, just like the reply version. So interestingly, this doesn't have conditions. Outlook user can be anyone. It's that it's excluding certain users. So if you're in marketing or sales, because of course you have these signatures, this will not be applied to your emails. Now, interestingly, because it's identical to the reply version, this is the default for both replies and new messages in Outlook. So, you don't have to, by the way, create these templates from scratch. You can just select one from our template library and swap in your own company logo and use one of these. But you can, if you want, you can create it from scratch right in the editor. So for example, if I click Edit up here, we can see I've got a company logo, I've got some contact details, and these fields will be automatically completed for each user. So I can see how they look, say for this example user, Karen Green. I can see how they look for myself. I can see how they look for all sorts of people in my organization, just to make sure that they fit with all the longer job titles and names perhaps. And if I need to, I can edit it directly in the source HTML, if I know HTML that well. So I can close this. But you'll recall that this wasn't the entirety of my signature. I also had some extra content, like this campaign banner and this social media feed. These are being governed by these campaign policies so that we can add a little bit of extra content on using a separate policy and separate rules. So let me show you why that's advantageous. First of all, if I go into our October banner, now what I've done here is I have this additional banner in here and in this image. And in this date range feature, I've set that this is only going to appear between these two dates, because we're only holding these webinars during that month. And if I click on edit, what I can do is I can preview this. And when I click on it, you'll see that it goes through to the URL as normal, but afterwards, we have this email address added. So that in Google Analytics, we can track this and track whose email signature generated this traffic. And when someone clicks on another page, goes to visit something else, we can see that all that traffic was generated by this particular user's email signature. So if I close that, I can show you how I put that together. So in here, I have my email signature banner. Now I have the image. And what I've done is I've hyperlinked it, and in the source view, I've added in this contact detail field so that that's going to be automatically completed for each user. So if I click preview here, then I can see that if I type in, say, a different user's name, like my own, and click apply, that same page we loaded isn't going to end with Karen's email address. Instead, it'll end with mine. So if I close that and I type in, say, another colleague's name and click apply, when I click on this, as you'd expect, it ends instead with his email address. So I can differentiate between the two naturally and seamlessly within Google Analytics. So let's close this. Let's take a look at how all this logic fits together in the policy tester. So if I go down here to policy tester, and I just go and click run test. Now it's going to run this test with me as the user and this as the test date, because remember we had some date sensitive rules set up earlier. So I'll click run test. And now it's only listing the signatures that I am applied to. So for example, I am only seeing signature sales, sales signature secondary, and the reply signature. Because I'm not in marketing and this one excludes me, we are not going to look at those. Instead, it's only going to show me the relevant policies. So, starting with this primary policy here, it starts off looking exactly as I designed it. We've got it just straightforward in there, contact details, certification, and social media link. But underneath, we have all these campaign policies. So if I scroll down, we can see that here, this date pattern doesn't apply in this rolling banner policy because it's not in this particular date range. Same thing for that next policy. And then here, the date range does apply. Yes, it is between these dates. So that means that I can decide exactly when different banners appear, and I can seamlessly switch from one to the next. So as soon as one stops, the other one can start being triggered. It's not like I have to manually go in here at midnight and switch them over or something. So then it's asking if this condition does apply. If, for example, I'm a member of sales, and yes, I am. So if I scroll down a little further, it applies its Outlook campaign, as it says. It's added this banner under here. And if I cancel that, and then in here, it's asking whether indeed I'm in marketing or in sales. And because yes, I am, it's going to now add this Twitter feed policy. So altogether, we see it almost complete. So down at the very bottom, I can see it here with everything I need in it. Logo, contact details, banner, social media feed, and then over a little bit, those same certification and follow buttons that I showed you a moment ago. So, same thing over here for my other secondary sales signature. So it starts off looking exactly as I designed it, and then as we go down, it's having content added to it by each individual campaign policy. Nice. Now, just to compare that with that reply signature. So instead, what we have here is it just starts off plain, no additional content because that's how this template was designed. And then in here, it's going to skip each one of these policies, as you can see, because of course it has been set to have no campaign or disclaimers added to it. So here in the policy tester, we get the 3 signatures I showed you at the beginning. I get my primary signature, and then of course the secondary signature with the same banner content underneath, and then this reply signature, which is nice and plain and straightforward. Great. Now, I mentioned in the presentation that you could also control fonts and formatting. So in here, for example, this is my plain font policy. This isn't controlling signatures. This is controlling the actual formatting of the message. So if I go here in Outlook options, you can see what I've selected. So this font has been restricted to Arial typeface, size 10, and the color has to be black. And then in replies, it's the same except for it's a navy colored font, as usually happens in Outlook, just to keep people from using, say, Comic Sans or anything goofy. Now, I've also said that it's going to remove all previous existing signatures. So that means that people can't tamper with my design or try and create their own signatures. This is automatically going to overwrite them all. And it can do the same for stationery, which would prevent things like Outlook themes and backgrounds, which can sometimes look a little unprofessional and unpleasant. And just like in my other policies, I can use conditions, exceptions, and date ranges to decide exactly who gets this and when. Now, that was Exclaimer Signature Manager. Let's go over and take a look at Exclaimer Mail Disclaimers. So in here, I can go to my smartphone policy. So you'll notice, first of all, that this template is very, very similar to that reply policy that I showed you earlier. In fact, it's identical. So in this case, what this is doing is this is adding this content, which you saw in that reply version. Great. But in this case, it's going to add it to any message when a disclaimer isn't already present. So what that means is it's going to detect when an email is blank, it doesn't have a signature on it, and add this one. So if I'm emailing from a smartphone, of course, or from a tablet or any device that isn't using Outlook that would have added those other signatures I showed you, this is going to catch that and add on this signature. So it's the simple, nice reply one because we might be typing up on, say, a narrow smartphone, and what we can do here is guarantee that there's always a high quality, brand conformant signature on every message. Now, it's also worth pointing out quickly that we can use additional conditions in Exclaimer Mail Disclaimers. So before we had conditions based on the user, but here we can add in things based on the sender, the recipient, which is slightly different. So I could maybe, if I wanted, have a policy just for certain recipients. A great example might be, instead of showing you this smartphone policy, this internal policy. So in here, I've got, say, staff picture and some of their internal details that are relevant. So here in conditions, I'm only going to add this signature when the sender is inside my organization and the recipient is inside my organization. Now, let's take a look at the template I've made for this internal signature because I've done some interesting things with the contact details. So here we have display name, their internal extension, their IP phone, and then of course the office that they work in. So if I hit preview and I say, type in my colleague Elizabeth's name, we can see she has all the details. Display name, her internal extension, the office that she works in, perfect. But my colleague Taylor, I know for a fact, doesn't have an internal extension. He's generally working out on the road, so we haven't given him an internal extension because he's so rarely at his desk in the office. So if I hit apply, it's hidden that internal extension field. So instead we just see Taylor, we see office, but there's no unusual blank space next to extension. So if I click design here, let me show you how I put that together. So actually, let's start from scratch. Let me grab this. We'll just delete it all. First thing I want to do is insert an HTML table. That's just to hold everything in place. Then I will stick in the thumbnail photo that you saw there, profile picture. So I'll go up to Fields, and I'll select AD Pictures and Thumbnail Photo. So it'll pull it directly from the Active Directory. Great. Now, if I click Preview, I can see the photo in there for Taylor. I could probably see it for Elizabeth too if I wanted. Great. So now what I want to do is split this particular row so that I can have those multiple rows for contact details you saw previously. So I'll right click, select split, and select vertical in this case rather than horizontal. That way I can have these multiple rows you saw earlier. So now let's start putting in these contact details. So I'll go to message sender, go to general, hit display name, and I'm just going to work my way down that way. Now, here, I'm going to add in the prefix that you saw, ext, and then I will select hide if blank. Now, if I leave it as it is, and I hit preview, for some users, it will just be left blank. So, for example, Taylor still has it appear even though he doesn't have an IP phone. Whoops. Whereas, say, for my colleague Walt, his does, so that's fine. What we want to do here is use this hide if blank feature and set it to true so that if someone doesn't have that particular contact detail, we don't get that annoying blank space that we saw earlier. Great. So again, let's just add in another field. Nice. So if I hit preview, I can see it for Taylor. I can see it, say, for my colleague Walt. Nice. I can maybe see it for me. Great. So that's how you can put it together if you so choose, though as I said earlier, you have a full template library to choose from. So just to quickly mention it. Now, you saw in here how we pretty much had all the 6 C's: conforming with the logo, contact details, connecting with social media, certification. We've got the communicating campaign banner. We've got more social media down here. However, where's the disclaimer? Now, what I've done is I have it being added at the server level. So here, instead, what we're doing is adding the disclaimer as it passes through Exchange. So instead of it appearing under every single message I write, it's going to appear once down at the very bottom of the email trail. So what I have here is, in mail disclaimers, I have these original message above reply separator and original message below reply, which means that, for example, if I wanted, I could set it so that content appears not underneath my most recent message, say this is the one that I've written, but instead appears down here at the very, very bottom. So instead of adding it in Outlook, I've added it using Exchange so that I can have a little bit more flexibility. And on top of that, I have the ability to ensure that multiple disclaimers are not added. Great. So those were our 2 signature products in a nutshell, really. Now, back into the presentation to explain a few things that aren't necessarily apparent as you go through a demonstration. So in any organization, we would actually see room for both products. Signature Manager to let you see the signatures you type and choose which one you want to use as you go. And then Mail Disclaimers to cover smartphone use, to add those signatures when you are emailing from an iPhone or a BlackBerry or another mobile device. Now you could also have the different types of software control different components in the signature. Say, have Signature Manager cover some of the content that you want people to have a little choice over or to see as they're typing the message, like the campaign banner, like the contact details. And also, mail disclaimers to cover the content you want to automatically add, like the mail disclaimer, and then also any social media content that you want to have updated in real time as soon as it goes live. So, for example, a feed from a recent social media site. So, now that you know a little bit more about our signature software, you can, of course, download a free trial from our site. And it's fully featured. It has all of the capabilities of the purchased product. The only difference is you can only use it for 30 days. Now, you can also try it in a secluded cloud environment. If you have a very big or busy environment and you maybe need a little help, then we will be very happy to offer you your own test environment up in the cloud. If your environment's that big or that busy, let us know and we can give you a hand. We can also guide you through installation and offer our template design service from our dedicated in-house design team. And the guys doing that will be Microsoft certified IT professionals who can help you out via phone, email, and online chat. And if you need any help via remote desktop, they'll be happy to do so in multiple time zones. So whether you're in London or Louisiana, you can get help during your office hours. Now, we price our products per email user. So whether you have 10 users or 10,000, you always get an affordable, cost-effective price. And you get a huge discount on support when you take 3-year support. And you can get that in multiple currencies: US dollars, Australian dollars, Canadian dollars, British pounds, and euros. So, for any more information, go to our website. We have a ton of collateral up on there that you can use and you can make use of and devour. And also get in touch on help@exclaimer.com or any of the contact details at exclaimer.com/contact. So, thanks a lot for watching and have a great day.